So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Eliud Kibuchi. So Kibuchi, he's a statistician based in Glasgow, in the University of Glasgow. We worked together in another urban health consortium, ARISE. So Kibuchi, he's a very special, guest speaker for this seminar today. So his research focuses on statistical and survey methods and the application of these surveys to understand health inequalities in public and global health. So, Kibuchi, is over to you. Thank you for accepting this invitation.
Okay, thank you, Naomi. So, and Helen for your invitation. So I'm going to provide this talk and I'm going to cover it from a perspective of what is health inequalities, social determinants of health, and then we go to intersectionality, and then how we can apply quantitative methods to understand the intersectionality from socio-epidemiological perspective. So when we look at the research in most of the instances, especially in terms of the research we are involved in, is to look in terms of health inequalities, because we understand that some groups of people have worse health conditions compared to others. And in a more fair world is where everyone has an equal opportunity to achieve whatever they want in life. So then do we define health inequalities? These are usually the observable differences in health experiences and outcome between different groups. And in context of like chorus, where you are looking in terms of gender and health system, it's because there's differences in terms of how both people, based on gender, they utilize health systems. So you want to see, why do these differences exist? Which groups have worse health outcome? But the best option is where everyone has an equal opportunity to access the health. And usually these differences are usually perpetuated over the life course, so they don't start at a certain point of life. For example, a child born in slums right now, or let's start from a pregnant woman in slums, there's high chances that they are not getting the good antenatal care. And also a child born from that mother, mostly they won't be in a position also to get like good nutrition, other challenges in life. They go to school, they don't get good opportunities because there are not schools around, there are no green places for them to play. So this is a situation where these inequalities are perpetuated over the life course until a point happens where there's an intervention. And the differences between health inequalities and inequities is because for inequities is where there are unfair differences, which can be prevented by ensuring that there's fair access to the resources. A good example is like healthcare access. We know that if there's good interventions in terms of like health insurance and social security, everyone will be in a position to get good healthcare access. But in situations where especially people are supposed to pay out of their pocket, we find that the people who are already socioeconomically disadvantaged, who have worse health outcomes, they also tend to be not able to access their health because they cannot afford to pay. So when we look at health inequalities, it's usually good to approach this from a perspective of social determinants of health, which are the conditions in which people are born, grow, live, work, and age. Going to the example I used of a child born in slums, let's say, let me give an example of like ARISE, we are working in several slums. So let me use like Cock Bay in Sierra Leone. So Cock Bay is a rural area in Sierra Leone, which is usually characterized by poor sanitation and floods. A child born there will already start experiencing worse health conditions because they are born in a place with poor sanitation. And then the same Cock Bay, there is no formal health facility. So meaning that for someone to get access to health, they have to move away from the settlement. So it means that that child will not have good health access from when they are young. And also when they are living there, because of the poor sanitation, they may end up having poor life conditions. And this also goes back to, if you have poor education, it means that we know that especially in developing country, education is one of the key social mobility indicators. When you have higher education, there's high opportunity that you will end up getting better position. And if this good education is dependent on which schools you attend, so meaning that if your area doesn't have good schools, the chances of someone going to college or university becomes diminished, which then it means it will be very hard for someone to get better job opportunities to improve in their social mobility. And also age. As person, when you are very young, a person who is very young, they are very susceptible to health conditions, poor health conditions. And then when they are very old, so all these factors, they play into part in shaping whether someone will have good or worse health conditions. And these factors, they do is influence the distribution of income, power, and resources. And this is based on the context which I've explained beforehand, that based on where someone is born, there's high chances whether they will have good outcomes in terms of life or worse outcomes, whether they will be able to access resources or they will not be able to access resources. So one of the aspects in terms of social determinants of health, they usually tend to be varied, multilevel, complex, and interacting. So what we mean by varied, it is at personal level, as an individual, it will influence how your health is based on underlying health conditions and other aspects. At the household level, it will determine based on how well the household you are living in is socioeconomically better. Then multi-level, you can go at national, let's say at national level. A child born in UK and a child born, let's say in Sierra Leone, the example I was giving, just by being born in given country, it influences the chances of you having a successful life in terms of health and other indicators of living conditions. So, and still in Sierra Leone, we have like someone born in Cock Bay, someone born in a more better settlement, and then we go to this district level, provincial level, national level. So these are all the factors that influence persons' health conditions, and they are complex because the complexity comes from a fact that you cannot be able to understand how they influence health inequalities in isolation. So you have to look at both individual, household, national, or whichever level you want to consider. And they interact each other, meaning that one condition may be affecting how someone will have worse or health conditions. So they don't work in isolation. So when you are looking now from especially intersectionality perspective, the key question is to ask yourself is, how are these factors interacting to create someone to have either marginalized or a privileged position in terms of their healthcare access or any health outcome which you are considering. And their importance varies by the context at which life course someone is. And here I'm saying, like, let's say gender. If we are to look in terms of healthcare access and we look at the type of reproductive health, we know that in terms of the reproductive health, importance of, let's say, attending maternity healthcare and stuff like that, it usually affects women compared to men. So in the context of the reproductive age, in terms of maternity cover, let's say it would be more impactful if the women can have access in terms of the maternity cover. And in terms of old age, we also know that at old age, people have multimorbidities, both all the genders, they have the multimorbidities. So we cannot say in isolation that, or put it in context that these social determinants of health are fixed. They don't tend to be fixed because at each life stage, they keep changing depending on what's important at that age. From when someone is born, when they are very susceptible to multiple health outcomes which affect children, all the way to the old age when they are affected by different multimorbidities. And that's why when it comes to tackling these social determinants of health and how they influence social health inequalities, it tends to be very complex and also sometimes filled with ambiguity. Because if once you start looking on another, it develops multiple layers in which you want now to get understanding of. And that's where now intersectionality comes in, because intersectionality helps us to understand how this health, social determinants of health can help us understand these health inequalities from a combined social positions. What I mean by combined social position is where I can combine factors from, let's say, individual, household, community, all the way to the national level, and understand how do they drive health inequalities. For example, I may be trying to understand children who live in informal settlement in Nairobi, how are they, how do they face health inequalities compared to the children who don't live in slums? So I can be in a position to understand all those contexts. And also, we understand that despite people in slums being marginalized, some people tend to have better living conditions compared to others. For example, someone who is living in slums and is disabled and employed, they may have worse health outcomes in terms of compared to someone who is also living in the same slums, who is not disabled and is employed. So by intersectional analysis, we are able to bring out those vulnerable groups within already marginalized group. And by looking on all the concept, it will help us like understand from a perspective as how do these interconnected systems generate health inequalities. And going to the previous example, which I gave about child born in Cock Bay in Sierra Leone. Cock Bay is an informal settlement in Sierra Leone, Freetown, Sierra Leone. So we can look from a perspective of a child born there from a single mother, not employed, with a disability, with a disabled person in the household. How do they face, let's say, health utilization compared to the same child born in Cock Bay, but coming from not a single headed household, and their the head of household is in a income generating activity, and also there's no disabled person. So it's to look on how all these systems generate health inequalities, and we can see which groups need more interventions to help them access the health or to help reduce the risk of whichever health outcomes they are facing. And it's mostly when we look for intersectionality perspective, it's just to identify vulnerable groups by exposing which power structures and marginalization they do usually face. Now we come to intersectionality in population health. The theory from intersectionality comes from feminist research, and it's usually rooted in qualitative studies rather than quantitative studies. And the reason why it's mostly rooted in qualitative studies is because it's very, for the way the qualitative studies are conducted, it becomes much deeper to look in terms of groups. But then when it comes to population health, once you have so many groups, they tend to have some issues, especially in modeling perspective. So what I mean by population health is from a perspective of socio-epidemiological perspective, like quantitative rather than qualitative. And is to the application of intersectionality mostly in population health is to understand which groups are more vulnerable, and this is for policy development and interventions. And there are two considerations which are key in terms of undertaking intersectionality in population health. First, whether the intersection social positions are of sufficient value to merit standing. And second, which modeling approach to use. So when I come to the whether intersection social positions are of sufficient merit to sufficient value to merit the standing, what I imply here is the social position are the variables which you want to consider of key importance, both the literature and also the community-wise, drive health inequalities or the health outcome you are considering. Let me give an example of some of the work which we were doing with Arise in Sierra Leone. So a community in Sierra Leone, the Kokube, they identified that health utilization or health access is one of the key issues they face in their society. And then the community went ahead and identified some of the factors which may be influencing the community not accessing the health. So, for example, they identified the head of household, the disability in the whether they have a disability in the household, whether someone is in an income generating activities, the food security in the household. So, and then we as researchers, we went back and then looked from the literature perspective, whether does this aspect which the community sees affect them, do usually influence health utilization? And we found that they do. So when you are also looking in terms of intersectional, you don't just come and consider variables from wherever you want to consider. They should be driven by the community needs, because first you are working on the community. So you have to understand community needs, what are their issues, what the community thinks are the issues which are driving the health inequalities. Then you look back to the literature, you see literature also cover this aspect which the community are saying are driving the health inequalities. And then the next thing is modeling approach to use. This is the key thing, because some of the modeling approaches which are there, they have limitations on how much you can use to evaluate whether certain factors are driving health inequalities or not. And I'm going now to go to the modeling perspective. And this is where now I will also introduce MAIHDA. The reason why I started with the overall introduction is to bring to context like how the process iterates rather than just going directly to the application of MAIHDA approach. So quantitative intersectionality, where now MAIHDA comes into, is we want to examine health inequalities by considering social position from combined social determinant categories. And as mentioned in the previous slide, for you to determine which categories to consider, it's always important to include the community which you are working on. Let the community come with some of the factors which they think they drive their health inequalities, and then you can back them with the literature, rather than you as a researcher going and saying, okay, these are the factors which I think they are affecting the community, because the communities are diverse, and the community, they know their lived experiences more compared to someone who is not living there. And there are two main approaches which are utilized, which is fixed effect modeling and multilevel modeling. I'm going to cover both of them in the next slides. So fixed effect modeling is mostly the conventional approach which is used. This relies on single level regression model with the main effect and interaction term. For example, what I mean by main effect is the factors which you want to consider, the variables. Like in the previous slide I mentioned, like let's say we are creating a social position based on gender, age, and social class. So these are the main effects, the main factors which are influencing, let's say, healthcare access. And then we can interact them, let's say gender times age, to see how health care access changes dependence on someone's age and, let's say, the gender. Now, when we are analyzing for fixed effect modeling, is where, let's say, in my example which I'm providing, we are looking on health care inequalities access by gender. Let's use the normal gender, have two categories, let's say male and female. Age, we have three categories. Let's say this study was conducted for everyone in the population. So we have the young people up to 18 years, then 18 to 50 years as the middle group, let's say 15 plus as the old people. So that's our three categories. And then we have social class, poor, medium, and rich. This is hypothetical. So I'm just giving a hypothetical example. So in terms of fixed interaction model, if you are to fit this model, we will have 5 main effects. Let me have some more.
Kibuchi, are we meant to be able to see your slides at the moment?
Yeah. Are you not seeing the slides?
No, they suddenly went off. We can see you, but we
Oh.
can't see the slides. So I think somehow it stopped sharing.
And I've been
I
going
can see the slides.
I can
I
too.
can see the slide. I can see the
Oh.
slide.
Oh goodness, it's just me. I'm so sorry for interrupting. It must be something about how I've set up my screen. Apologies, everybody. Sorry, carry on, Kibuchi.
Are you on the slide with the...
I must have clicked something on my Zoom. Don't worry.
So yeah,
view-
I can
the
see
view
fixed
option.
effect modeling.
Oh, yeah,
So-
that's the current slide I'm in.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, and if anyone has some questions as I continue, you can just raise your hand or put it on the chat. And then Noemi will be checking. But also I will take questions after that. So in this case, we will have 5 main effects. The main effect comes from, because age, now gender is 2 categories. So we have the reference category as, let's say, as male. So you will have female as one estimate. Then age has 3 categories. Let's say the youngest group is the reference. So we will have 2 estimates. And then for the middle group and the older people. And then the social class, we have 3 categories. We take the first one as the reference, and then we will have rich and the middle group as the parameter estimates. So we will have 5 main effects. And then we will have 18 interaction effect. So 18 interaction effects comes from, if you are to do interactions for all the categories here, we will have 2 times 3 times 3, which is like 18 interaction effects. So if you are to fit this model with only 3 variables you are considering, we will have 23 parameter estimates. Now, in most of the models which are usually fitted when you are looking in terms of interactions, you have more than 3 variables. And also you have more categories. And for the fixed effect models, the more you put interactions terms, the more it keeps increasing, and it become much harder even for some of the statistical packages to handle. So it has its own disadvantages, which I'm going to cover in the next slide. So despite the utilization of fixed effects interaction approach, in terms of looking in terms of intersectionality or how social positions interact, it faces 4 key main disadvantages. Complexity increases geometrically with added social position. As you continue increasing the variables which you want to consider, then the model complexity increases to a position where most of the softwares cannot handle, especially when you have big data and also you have so many variables. Then the interaction terms which you consider, they assume they are independent of each other and they are not joint effects of position. So what I mean by independence is, in this example, if I'm looking in terms of interactions between gender and age, I will consider only the gender, let's say male, times the young people, and assume that the social class does not influence them. But we know that in terms of interaction, that your gender, your age, and your social class, they both work in tandem with each other to influence your healthcare access. So that's another disadvantage of interaction term-based. It assumes independence and not joint effect. Second, that is the limit in terms of interaction types. Example, when you have some categories which with a smaller sample size. So as you continue increasing the number of interactions, the cell size for each interaction reduces. And when you have very small sizes of the cell size, the estimate which you obtain, they tend to be not efficient. They tend to be biased because of lack of good sample size to give much enough power to get correct estimates. Then another key thing, and this is very important, the fourth one, in terms of when you are looking at about intersectionality. When you are using the intersectionality approach, it's mostly to get the notion which groups are more vulnerable, which groups are more marginalized in context of the whole population or the sample you are considering. So when you use the interaction-based approach, you have to select the reference category. And you can say the reference category is male. What it means is when you compare males and females, the yardstick in terms of achievement will be based on the male. So it reinforces the idea of the privileged groups as the standard for the comparison. So as long as anyone can achieve the standard of the reference group, then everyone is okay. So it reinforces the idea that the dominant groups, that's where everyone should be, rather than a way of like equality in context of whatever you are looking at. And that's where now the multilevel modeling comes in. So mostly multilevel modeling, it came mostly from the school-based analysis, where the assumption is children, in terms of school performance, a child born in a certain household, attending a certain school, they will be influenced in a way they perform in an exam. Because at household level, we have factors which will influence a child in terms of the school they attend and also the level of support they get. And then at school level, some schools are better equipped compared to others. So it means that at the end, the final score for a student will not only be influenced by the individual level characteristics of that student, but also at the household level characteristics and also the school level characteristics. Now, I will use this figure here to demonstrate how it works. So mostly in multilevel modeling, it assumes clustering of individuals by observable characteristics, let's say neighborhood, and combines social determinants of categories. So the first part of observable neighborhood, if we can check on this photo on the right, let's say we have we are looking in terms of the living conditions, best life. We can see that people around, if you can check my cursor, here there's high density of people living, and then the number of green spaces is less. Where people living here and here, these houses, there's less density of people, and they are surrounded by green spaces. And we know that people surrounded by green spaces, they tend to have better health conditions because they have places to go to relax, they have better health care. I mean, not better health, they have better air, like in terms of air pollution and stuff like that. So if we are just looking in terms of health among this group, we will know that based on the neighborhood someone is living, they will have either better access to green spaces where their children can play, or and good air because the density of people is less, compared to the people in neighborhoods with high density. So this is what I mean by clustering. So just by this figure, we can cluster people based on their neighborhood, and we can assess whether their neighborhood is helping them to have better living conditions or not. But also we can combine categories, and this is now where the MAIHDA approach comes in. We can also combine categories based like social determinant categories, let's say based on gender, age, and social class, to come with a cluster. Good example we can say, in the example I gave, a female who is younger and who is in the highest social class, all of them can be clustered as one cluster. Then we can have a second cluster of a male, the same age, the same social class. So on itself is cluster. So everyone who is within that level of categories, they are treated as a cluster, and they are highly likelihood they will be having the same aspect in terms of the health condition. And in the example I provided about healthcare, mostly you group the people as level 1, one level, and then the social strata as level 2. And so the next slide now, I will be covering the main aspect of this seminar, which is multilevel analysis of individual heterogeneity and discriminatory analysis, and how it's used in intersectionality analysis. But the whole rationale of it lies in terms of using this approach of multilevel modeling. So MAIHDA approach started its use around 2018 and has been applied in various fields in social epidemiology, from public health to global health research. And what it does, MAIHDA considers social position in terms of multiplicatively and not additively, meaning that they look from intersecting power dynamics that create health vulnerabilities. What here implies is, rather than looking on, let's say, gender alone, you consider gender, sex, and social class as all the factors that they are contributing to health inequalities, rather than looking only on each aspect in isolation. And usually it places the individuals at level 1. So each person is put at level 1. Then the nested intersectional strata, based on the social categories or social factors you are considering, they are usually placed at level 2. And it provided a very parsimonious way of analyzing even high-dimensional interactions, which is not possible with fixed effect interaction models, because it treats each social strata as a cluster on itself. And also it removes that limitations of including one class as a more privileged group as a yardstick to which to compare with, because all the clusters are treated equally. And then after analyzing those clusters is where you can be able to see which groups are more vulnerable compared to others. So what it does, it usually decomposes the mean outcome of any intersection strata into 2 components. Additive effect, which you attribute to each intersection based on the social determinants of health which you want to consider, and intersectional effects specific to each strata. So meaning you'll be able to see within each intersection, what are the differences, okay? Let's say we have the first intersection of females who are young, aged, let's say less than 18 years, and they are from the rich social class. You'll be able to see within that group, what are the differences within them. Then, based on all in our example I provided, I say we will have most 18 stratas. Based on those 18 stratas, you will be able to see which stratas are more vulnerable or are in a more disadvantaged position compared to others, and we can rank them. So it's usually implemented in 2 ways, in 2 stages. So you fit 2 models. The first model is known as null model, and then you have the main effect model. Let me provide a quick example here. Let's assume that we have a binary healthcare access outcome, yes and no, for individuals, 1 up to, let's say, 1,000 people we are considering now standing. And then we have our intersectional strata, let's say 1 up to 18 intersectional strata. Then, in this case, we have gender is 2 categories, age you will have 3 categories, and social class will be 3 categories. Then in total, we will have like 18 social stratas. So by modeling, we want to see, does health differ based on these 18 social stratas? And each individual from I to up to N, 1,000 people, will fit into any of this group. So the first model, when you are fitting, it includes only the intercept, and then you treat the social position as a random effect. And in this context, you don't incorporate any main effect. What I mean by main effect, that is age, gender, and social class, or the factors which you want to consider in your modeling. So this is the context of how you fit the model. You don't have to worry about the notations because most of the softwares can fit for you, but it's always nice to understand the theoretical context before you fit the model. So mostly our interest value here is this value mu 0J, because this one is the one which will also will indicate the level of variance which is explained by this intersectional strata, and it will show you whether the 18 groups which you have, they are equally accessing healthcare, or they differ. And if they differ, you'll be able to see which groups are better or worse compared to the average which you have. So you'll get the intercept, this beta notice, the intercept, and this is the random effect. And we have the variance, which will show you how it varies. Then using this variance, you can calculate the proportion of variance which you can attribute to differences across social strata. And the usually estimated using variance partition coefficient, which also is directly you can compute in most statistical software. And once you compute this value, if you get a value of 5%, higher than 5%, it shows that there are significant differences in terms of healthcare access inequalities between the social positions which you consider. Then the next thing is to now investigate, okay, this is only based on the intersectional strata. What about, we know that the variability of the healthcare access is also influenced by each specific variable which you use to create the intersectional strata. So the second model now, that's where now you come and now you control for the factors, let's say gender, sex, and social class, which you use to create this, the intersectional strata. And after incorporating them, the assumption is that once you, because the first, you are able to see how much intersectional strata variance is in the intersectional strata in model 1. Now, by controlling for the variables which you use to create this intersectional strata, you are trying to remove any variability which can be attributed to the main effect. And whichever remains, then you can attribute to intersectional strata. You can now confidently say that social positions, based on the factors I'm considering, they are actually creating inequalities, even after controlling for the main effect. And once you calculate a VPC, because you can also calculate various partition coefficient for model 2, in this case, the main effect model, it will indicate that all differences, if you obtain a 0, in healthcare inequalities are fully explained by the main effect. What this implies is the social position you consider, they no longer influence health inequalities. However, if you get a VPC which is not 0, it means that some of the intersectional inequalities in your outcome of interest can actually be attributed to the intersectional strata based on the variables you are considering. What that implies, rather than now targeting interventions based on each individual factors, you target interventions based on the combinations of these social positions. Let's say a single female, not employed, and they have disabled person. And also from model 1 and model 2, the narrow model where you don't incorporate any main effects, you only incorporate the social strata as a random effect. And the second model, which include the main effects used to create the social strata and also the random effect, you can compute the percentage of variance expressed by adding main effect, which is the proportional change in variance, PCV, between model 1 and 2. And a lower proportional change in variance suggests more unexplained variance is attributable to intersectional effects. That implies that then, as a researcher, you can attribute the differences which you have obtained in terms of healthcare access, or whichever outcome you are looking, to this social position, meaning that in terms of intervention, it should be proportionally targeted, because some groups are worse off compared to other groups. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can see Kibuchi.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fine.
Or it's just that I'm blending, then it's a note text. So this is the formula for calculating the VPC and PCV You don't have to worry about this because most of the softwares will do for you. But what they indicate is, this one is the variance for model 1, which denotes the intersectional strata, and then plus 2.39 because it's a binary variable. So this is the random error, and then you constrain it to random to standard logistics. And this is PCV, which is the variance for random variance for model 1 minus random variance for model 2 divided by random variance for model 1 times 100, which I explained what PCV and PPC do previously. These are the formulas, but you do directly with the statistical software, so you don't have to worry about it. The most important thing is to understand what they actually assess. And time is running off. So in the ARISE project, which we were looking in terms of health inequalities in slums, which Noemi and Helen were part of, we used this approach in 2 papers, and also we are analyzing other work using it for health utilization in Sierra Leone. But so far, the work which we did were looking about health inequalities for under 5 children living in slums. And in the first one, we are looking in Nairobi slums, and we are able to find that children who are aged less than 1 year from rural and rural ethnic group, and they are recent migrants to the communities they are living in, and from the household facing catastrophic health costs, experience health worst conditions. So what does this imply? It means that all the children, let's say in informal settlements, they are susceptible to worse health outcome. But then this group is more worse. So meaning that if there's interventions going on, a proportionate targeting will be very helpful because first targeting this group because it's a more vulnerable position. And if you need more information about this work, you can have a look, and I will share the slides which you can look for the paper and read about it. Then also we looked at the effects of steel for children under 5 in Dhaka, Bangladesh. And we found that older children, 2 to 5 years, living in household with younger hens, 13 to 29, with better waste disposal, unemployed mothers, and residing in Dhaka division were most vulnerable to cough. And that's why in my previous I said that when we are looking for social position to choose, they tend to be specific for each community. You can be working, let's say, for a research in Kenya, Sierra Leone, and another country, but based on the factors which drive health inequalities, they may differ based on those countries. And even some communities, they differ within communities. So that's always why important when you are choosing which variables to consider for social position to have an information from the local community exactly what affects them. So if you need more information about those papers, you can have a read. And if you have any question, you can email any of the others who are involved in those works. So to conclude, MAIHDA approach usually quantifies health inequalities through intersectionality. And it's a new method which is taking a lot of usage because people are having a lot of drawback using fixed effects approach. And by using it, it will be able to help you see which groups are more vulnerable within marginalized. This can help in terms of policy development and interventions for marginalized groups, and especially for targeted proportionate interventions. And one way MAIHDA has done is to bridge the gap between intersectionality theory, which was mostly using qualitative and quantitative social epidemiology. And based on the research which you are undertaking in chorus, especially when you're looking on gender and health access, I think MAIHDA will be a valuable approach when you will be looking in terms of gender and equity issues in urban health systems, because you will be able to identify even within this group of females or males or other genders you are considering, which groups is more vulnerable. Because we can assume that one gender is vulnerable, but within those genders themselves, when you combine with other social positions, you'll be able to get out which groups are more vulnerable, which needed more targeted interventions. And also sometimes you may be thinking that certain genders are not vulnerable, but then when you include other social positions, you actually find that they are actually more vulnerable and their at worse in terms of accessing health system. They are worse than thought of. Yeah. So it's an approach which I can recommend in terms of its usage, because it will help you in terms of identifying most vulnerable groups in terms of utilizing urban health systems. And that's the end of my talk. And any questions, I will